today's world, there are no deadlines. I mean, you are the master of your deadlines and how many deadlines you want to create. So in the years that we grew up as journalists, we used to have something called news services. I mean, it's almost, something which you've forgotten about, but just to remind all of you, we have news services like Reuters, Associated Press, United News of India, Press Trust of India. So when breaking news used to happen, in our offices, we used to hear a bell, that an important story is coming from UNI or PTI, which were the most important sources of breaking news. And let me tell you, this is not all that old. Maybe this is 15 years old, 20 years old, yeah? Something like that, 15 to 20. So you would hear a bell, and the attender would come and alert you sometimes if you were not that, some important story, some alert is coming, maybe somebody has been killed, some news of an assassination, somebody has resigned, that. So that was breaking news for us. And news services, like everyone else, used to like to trouble people who work for newspapers. So often when we would go home at 8 or 8:30, that was a time news agencies would release some of their stories. So that newspaper reporters didn't have enough time to contact people or rehash the story. So that was the world of breaking journalism. All that has now changed, totally, since television has come into the picture. And if you see a screen, of TV news today, I think when future historians study that screen, they're going to have a lot of trouble in figuring out, like the Harappa script, we've not been able to figure it out. So what links with what? Because if you see, say on a major news channel, you will have at least 6 scrolls on occasion running, So it's really a barrage. And what our television has in a sense done, breaking news, they have replaced pictures with graphics. And a lot of it is much cheaper. You have good graphic artists, so you don't need to spend so much money on employing people to gather pictures. And if you see, say 10 years ago or 5 years ago on television, you would have seen lot more of different channels, but today you see, say, a mic of ANI, because ANI is a service provider to all such news channels. So I think that I'm not going to be value judgmental about breaking news, because this is our business. This is the phenomena that we are all confronted with, and this is a phenomena which we need to look at and try and understand. I think the one major casualty of breaking news is that verification has been given the go-by. Fact-checking. Checking, is what you're reporting, is it correct? And it's not just television today. It's the web, most important. Perhaps the web is a medium which is quicker than television in so many ways. So fact-checking is, in a sense, a casualty of breaking news. It's important to be first. Yeah, it's important to be first. But in my dictionary, it's more important to be correct. I think that is something which, we grew up with. So in the days when UNI used to matter, the United News of India, which is now reduced to a pale shadow of its former self. So they used to say that UNI was quick with the news and quicker with the denial, because PTI was seen as this very statist news organization, which would not sort of extend itself in any way. So these are all things which, happen. And, telling you about UNI, this is an anecdote which I heard, which I must share with you, that Kuldeep Nair, one of the most, big-time journalists of this country, had gone to cover the Tashkent Pact. And when other journalists, after their stories were over, they went off to have a drink, Kuldeep Nair went to meet some people. And Kuldeep Nair got what I think is arguably one of the biggest scoops in Indian journalism. So when he got that scoop, he called up the UNI office, and pretty difficult to call from Tashkent to Delhi. And he spoke to their chief news editor and he said, here, note this flash down. Prime Minister Shastri is dead. So he said, who's that? He said, I'm Kuldeep from Tashkent. He said, what rubbish, I just spoke to Kuldeep, this is all nonsensical news, and he banged down the phone. So that scoop almost didn't happen, but Kuldeep Nair was persistent, and he got on the line again, and he spoke to this guy, and I won't use the language he used. He used some good abuses for the guy who had picked up the phone, and said, this is an alert. And that was a story which went out only on you and I that day. So his book, Scoop, or Scoops, you should take a look at it. It's a great example of, what a persistent journalist can do. So those were the days that we're talking about. Of course, it's all changed, means of communication and all are so easy. So I was telling you about fact-checking, being a casualty as far as breaking news is concerned. And nowhere has that been more evident to me as a journalist as when I saw the counting for the Bihar elections on the 12th of October. NDTV and Times Now, they ran with a wrong story for close to 3 hours. Close to 3 hours they ran with a wrong story. So here it's not even breaking news, it's much worse than that. Okay? So when you're sitting in a TV studio, quite apart from what you say, it's what you're listening to. So you're listening to your producer, telling you hundreds of things in your ear. So what is the producer doing? The producer is watching all the other channels in case you don't have access to it. So for 3 hours, the best Indian news television channel dished out to its viewers information which was totally wrong, without basis. Everyone has a crisis. You want to run with the latest news. So on the web, I called up my colleagues in Chennai, where our web team is handled, and I said, let's go with this slow tortoise-like election commission, because it's so chaotic and it's so confusing that we are not in a position to say anything. So let's simply go with the election commission numbers. And that is tough, because we are also competing, because the web editors are looking at the hits that you're getting on your site. And obviously the hits on a day like that are huge, they're massive, and they're important. But as I said, in my view, it's good to be fast, it's good to be quick, but it's even better to be correct. And what we saw that day on Times Now, on NDTV, and CNN, IBN had the good grace to correct itself. And that's an example. Yes, in our profession, we make mistakes. We will always make mistakes, because ours is often not the finished product, it's going with what you have. So I think that the ability to correct yourself, the ability to say you're wrong and quickly correct. Is no point in apologizing 12 hours later. On television, it's a pointless exercise. So if someone has made such a huge error, that if, say, a newspaper had been printed, I'm just giving you an example, with that kind of information, that newspaper's image would have been totally mud. Just because you have a screen in which you can remove something, that doesn't mean that it makes it right. That doesn't mean that you can give this kind of information to your viewers. Because essentially, what are you doing? You're giving information, you don't know what is the source. So sourcing of stories, whether it's breaking news or whether it's writing a caption for a picture or whatever it is, you must be able to source properly. You must be able to get names right. That's very important, by the way. Ask the person the name. What is your name? What is your designation? How do you spell it? All these things matter a lot in our profession. So you must have the courage as journalists to go up to someone and say, hey, okay, can you give me your card? Okay, you're not carrying a card. Could you write down your name for me? Could you write down your designation? So it's important. Fact checking is a core principle of journalism. If you can double source in an organization like the BBC, for instance, double sourcing is very important. One of the casualties that I was talking to you about breaking news is this, that we are often wrong, and we are often wrong because we are not checking, because we want to keep up with the other channel and the mistakes the other channel is making. So I would rather be in a position where you may be slower, but you get it right. That you can get at the click of a mouse any information that you want, the basic information. But people are still lazy, They're still lazy. They are not checking their facts. And whether it is spelling, on a scroll it's easy to remove. Once it's printed, it's difficult. You can remove anything that you put. So these are things which, and I also understand the pressures, I understand the pressures that journalists face. Because if you are outside, say, for a couple of hours, you are broadcasting from outside the venue where something important is going on. But you're not inside the meeting, but you're supposed to give the impression that you're reporting from what is happening inside the meeting, So it's a pretty tough job. It's not an easy job. And I'm also going to tell you my favorite television story, Soon after I came back, after a couple of stints in Sri Lanka and Pakistan and in Singapore, So I used to write on foreign affairs, much like Seema. And there was a day when, there was a time when India and Pakistan had expelled each other's high commissioners. So uske baad kya hua? I'm going to speak in Hindi and I will translate a little later if need be. So, so when the high commissioner had gone off, so after some gap of several months, a new high commissioner came. So all our TV channels were at Wagah border and they were broadcasting live. And I was just watching this at home before leaving for office. And this is perhaps my most favorite television story. And there was this young reporter who was going on, because it's tough to go on when you don't know what's happening. And suddenly she says, because after going on for half an hour, अभी आपने देखा कि पाकिस्तान के नए राजदूत एक बीवी और दो कुत्ते समेत वाघा बॉर्डर पार कर चुके हैं. So basically what was the journalist saying? That the new High Commissioner to India from Pakistan has just crossed the Wagah border with 2 dogs and 1 wife. Okay? So that's the kind of news environment that we have today. And I'm afraid it's getting worse. It's not getting any better because the quality that we associate or we should associate with television, yes, we can't do without breaking news. There's no doubt that I think our Indian news appetite has now been so whetted by breaking news that channels, international channels, often they look very boring, We have to live with this phenomena. And how do we live with this phenomena? We live with this phenomena by improving things. And how do we improve things? That in our newsrooms, whether it's web, whether it's television, whether it's print or whatever, we have systems and control. And above all, we have people who understand this business. We have proper supervision. So what is happening in our newsrooms today is that supervision is lax. That people are don't feel they have the authority to say, okay, we are not going to run. It's a big decision. When you decide what not to use, it's as important as deciding what to use. So if we are not sure about a story, we're not going to run with it. So these are the kinds of things that we have to do, and we have to sort of, because we live in an age where news is being miniaturized. I mean, Twitter today is as important a breaking news tool as anything else. And I tell my colleagues in my office, I said, a tweet is as important as writing an intro to your story. Because you may say, this is my personal view, but when you're associated with an organization, obviously the name of the organization is going to rub off, on that. So when you tweet, when you post something on Facebook, especially if you're a journalist, you should be able to have your sense of priorities and your facts very clear. At the end, if we are misinformed, if we are ill-informed, if we are misled, it impacts all of us as a society. I think that there's a need to look at journalism as a profession, which what I referred to you earlier, and our job is to inform and hopefully educate people, even while organizing, and this is a commercial profession. Say when I came into this profession in 1986, it was not as commercial as it was today. We didn't look at it as an exercise to make money. You can look at it from the other side and say, well, these guys are losers in any case. They had no hope of making money in any case. So, well, however you sort of see it. But the broad point that I'm making is that balance sheets alone cannot dictate the news agenda in this country.
Hello, sir. I'm Auritra Mukherjee from APG Institute of Mass Communication. So my question is, how can an organization, or for the matter of fact, a journalist, can be quick and be correct at the same time?
Well, yeah, I think quick and being correct are both important. So how are you correct? The way you're correct is that you have to be able to say something has happened, say there's an attack in Pathankot. We just get to know there's an attack in Pathankot. So how am I going to verify? I'm going to call up my colleague in Chandigarh who covers Punjab and say that this is the first information that we've got. He should be able to speak to the local police there and get the basic information that 3 attackers have come and 4 people have been killed. Suppose I say 40 people have killed and 10 people have entered and my information is wrong. Even today, there is no agreement fully on the number of attackers that went into Pathankot. If you see today's papers, you're still seeing those contradictions. So, over a month after the attack, there is no agreement on facts. So, the point I'm making is that television, so if somebody is seeing, say if you're seeing a scroll on one channel, your duty is to call the correspondent and go with what the correspondent is saying if you're an editor sitting in the newsroom. Your job is, as an editor, is not to run the story on your own. And at the end of the day, yes, grabbing eyeballs is important, TRPs are important, your bonus may depend on it, but the job of selling advertising on the channel is not that of the journalist. That is of somebody else who might earn a little more than what you and I earn. But the issue is that you have to be correct. So suppose you are wrong on 10 occasions. So what does it do? Your TRP is going to dive. People are going to say, oh, this channel, we can't watch it because we can't believe anything that comes on it. So that is something which is very important. So both things, they go together. So it's all about the hard work you put in. Say if you're a reporter in the field, say you're covering, I don't know, you're covering water resources and there's some important talks with Pakistan going on. So if you know the officials in the Water Resources Ministry, if you've been talking to them in advance, they know you that this is a trustworthy person, they're more likely to take your call and they're more likely to give you the information. So the more contact building you do, the more legwork you do, the better the chances of your getting a good story.
My name is Harish, and sir, in today's time when there is a lot of competitions and all that, sir, in terms of the newspaper's popularity, Times of India stands out the best. So I mean, isn't there pressure from the owners or like the Hindu, the corporates, to make it much more, competitive?
I don't speak officially, because I don't have much to do with numbers, but yeah, pressures are always there. And obviously the Hindu or anyone else wants to be the biggest newspaper, but the Times of India definitely is in a special category. I think that credibility is not something which you can earn in a day, but in today's world you will lose it very quickly. That's really the downside of social media, So the reputation a channel or an organization may have built up over all these years, you can lose it in a day. That's a scary thought. And also, a newspaper is also a collection, or a television channel is the sum total of the credibility of all the main correspondents and journalists who work for it. So when I lived in Pakistan, I didn't have much information, primary information. It was tough to go and meet people. So what did I do? I used to read the newspapers really carefully. And I would pick up bylines and see, oh, what is this guy reporting? So if he is reported, say, 5 days from now, there will be a missile test. On the 5th day, you can always see whether there was actually a missile test or not. Unfortunately, the print media is not only about circulation, it's about advertising. So you want to be the biggest because you want to garner the maximum advertising. When I first joined the Hindu, I asked my then editor, G. Kasturi, I said, how come all other papers have, the Telegraph has Anand Bazar Patrika or vice versa, Deccan Herald has Prajavani in Kannada, and Indian Express at that time had a Marathi paper, Telugu paper, the World. So how come the Hindu never ventured into the Tamil space? So his response to me, which is almost 30 years ago when I asked him this question, he said, I say, let us bring out a good English paper first. In the fickle media world, marketing guys will tell you, if you don't do this, you're going to lose that much. But content and credibility is something which will always sell newspapers.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Halima, and my question for you is, how can we go back to the type of journalism that is a public service when we have major channels that shadow the relevant socially conscious news? Like everything that's been published right now, you hear more about what happened in Paris than you hear about what happens in Syria, despite the impact it is. Yes, it is sad what happened there, but more people are being threatened back then there. So it's hard to know, people, they're bigger countries, larger media houses and everything, but socially what bothers us is the neighbors around us. So how can we go back to that time when you actually care about the media, where you actually care about informing people about what is actually important to them?
I think it's a really good question. And my answer is, I don't know whether it will satisfy you, but here's what I think. I think that that Western news organizations really think about themselves and their own priorities. And that's something which one can't really quibble about. But I think that I talk only a bit about India. We have a lot of expertise, journalistic expertise in India. And we also have entrepreneurial expertise. So there's no reason why we couldn't have come up with a BBC or a CNN or a Al Jazeera or a mix of it or our own model. But we failed to do so in the last 25 years of television journalism in this country. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't give that kind of sanctity or importance to news, because news is serious business, News is not something which you take lightly, which you present lazily. You take it seriously, So I think that the failure, say what's happening in Kenya, or what's happening in Somalia, or what's happening in Gambia. We don't really know about it, And people may rightly ask, which part, where is this country on the map? But yeah, say when a bombing happens in Kenya, where Al-Qaeda is responsible, or something else happens, then people take notice, or that hostage taking in the malls. So I think that this failure to build big organizations giving, space and time, but there is one small solution. So what often happens is that, like say, I remember when this thing happened in the Kenya mall, So I started following some really good journalists on Twitter, who were tweeting live from there and who were offering perspective. I think that what many of us can do if we want to be informed about that country is to really do a search on social media on what people are talking about. So like I lived in Pakistan, so I'm very interested in what happens there. So today I follow a lot of people, say, who are based in Peshawar, or who are based in Pakhtunkhwa, or who are based in parts of Sindh. So I see what they're saying, and that to me is very unadulterated views which are coming out. So I think that as journalists, we can be informed in very different ways. Say for what's happening in the Middle East, for instance. There are very many alternative news websites, for instance, which are available. Al Monitor is one of them, so which is looking at the region very differently. So I think there is that opportunity to look at it, but perhaps, I don't know, because television costs a lot of money. Television is a very expensive business. But one of the sad things is that in this country especially, we don't have any news radio, And if we had some good news radio, it would give a good run to the television channels also.